Welcome back. We're talking the youth wage subsidy issue here in South Africa, and we are joined by three men. And some of the things that you were saying in the break, Iraj, just made my hair stand. Some very, very bold statements. But one of the things you were talking about is the education system, and that being the core of this problem. And I wanted to ask you, Chris, when you look at the issue of education in South Africa, if you look at in terms of GDP, spends probably one of the highest in the country in terms of how much money is thrown or put into education system. That is not changing. And in the words of Iraj, if you look at the education system here in South Africa, he says, in his words, that it is absolutely rotten. What do we do then? If that is what we're faced with, are we probably dealing with the wrong thing when it comes to talking about what's happening at the top and not really going to the bottom of where this rot is coming from?
Exactly. I mean, if you look at the past statements by the Department of Basic Education, they talk about the need to upgrade the school infrastructure. There are problems. I mean, you go to villages, people are still studying under trees, mud schools and so forth. And then you've got this added problem of the fact that the apartheid system did not train black teachers in particular to teach advanced technical subjects in the sciences and in mathematics. So what we need to do really is to upscale the training of teachers, and basically the ones that are unwilling to undergo the retraining, then those ones will have to be, yeah.
Tim, I have to bring you in here from Cape Town. I mean, the education, and this is something that the DA has been talking about the education system and how much change needs to happen for it to actually work. What is your way in just that when it comes to the youth subsidy, it might, whatever the case may be, that there is that talk of maybe we do need to look at the education system as being the core of this problem and not trying to fix it from the top?
No, that's definitely one part of the problem. You have, as Iraj will tell you, as one of the country's most preeminent economists, you've got a supply problem with the supply of labor that speaks to education and training. And then you have a demand problem with the number of workers that business is demanding to fulfill a certain job. On the supply side, I think you should probably ask Chris a question about whether SADTU should be made accountable to performance contracts. That's one of the major issues that this government tried to push through, but one of the COSATU unions has opposed. I think that cuts right to the heart of the problem in education in South Africa today.
Chris,
but,
I would like you...
the youth wage subsidy is unashamedly a demand.
Tim, real quickly, I would like you to respond to what Tim has asked there.
Yeah, but you can only fulfill your part of the contract under certain conditions. Now you need to understand that children come to school with poverty, and the teachers themselves are not empowered to even meet those contract obligations. The material conditions under which the teachers execute their duties still leave a lot to be desired. So when you design contracts, design them fully cognizant of the material conditions under which teachers operate.
Are we ever going to, though? Are we going to have the perfect contract? Because there's always the issue of this is not perfect, this has not been done yet, and it doesn't seem, though, as the things are progressing because we're waiting for this perfect situation or this perfect contract.
Again, much like what we said, business is not the same and teaching situation is not the same. We need to separate the causes. Some of it is sheer incompetence of the teachers. Some of them, the teachers are very competent and capable. The school environment and the management is not right. So we mustn't lump them together. Is this broad brushing is good for politicking and for marching in the street? It's not good for sorting out the problem. And my suggestion is that we must enable the good teachers, the competent teachers, to be able to perform, and they will be happy to sign a performance contract. At the same time, a large proportion of teachers, no matter where you put them, no matter how much enabling environment, they are just not trained enough to deliver.
I want to go back to Cape Town. Tim, I mean, you're not disagreeing with the arguments that you're hearing here about the education system and where it's at right now. What do you, in terms of the youth subsidy, for you, what do you see about it working and probably changing the situation that we're seeing and we face with here in South Africa?
Well, what Treasury has done is identified a very unique problem when it comes to youth unemployment, and that is that you get these young people coming out into the labour market and they're unable to find their first job, and the longer they spend without finding a job, the less employable they become. So it's a targeted intervention that tries to create low-skilled jobs for young people to break the back of that, to make sure that they get a foot on a ladder and get some work experience. Now, Can I just clarify two things about the substitution effect, which you spoke about earlier? The first is that the labour laws of the country remain in place under this subsidy. And frankly, it's illegal to dismiss somebody simply because there's a younger worker who comes along. Those laws remain in place. Secondly, wage levels don't change. COSATU's been talking about the DA trying to cut the wages of young people. It's simply not true. The workers of the country will get the same wages they got before. Thirdly, it's not good business for businesses to fire experienced, productive workers in exchange for young workers who come with a very small subsidy for a period of 2 years. We think there might be some substitution effect, but it's going to be minimal in the context of 133,000 long-term sustainable full-time jobs for young people.
Tim, I want to ask you this. What is your understanding of why there is opposition from the ANC Youth League, from COSATU? Why do you think there is opposition if all these things that you're saying are going to work? The government has also gone and not only come from itself, I mean, it's gone outside of South Africa's borders to be able to come with some of these proposals. So this is not something they thought up themselves. And these are the proposals that they've gotten from people that have done the research. Why do you think there is opposition?
Well, I really couldn't tell you why there's opposition from the ANC Youth League, but my analysis of why there's opposition from COSATU is because they're there to represent the interests of the employed. That's their mandate, and they're doing it. The problem is that they have this special relationship with the ANC that allows them to block government policy at the expense of creating jobs for hundreds of thousands of young people. That is a disgrace.
And your response to that, Chris, would be what?
Actually, the ANC government has implemented policies to which COSATU is opposed. For example, loosening exchange controls. COSATU is vehemently opposed to that, but the ANC government is doing it. So the issue here is that in terms of demand-side interventions, actually the most sustainable demand-side intervention is to change the structure of the economy to be labor-absorbing, not the youth wage subsidy.
If somebody were to say, though, that you're probably holding these discussions back, your response would be what?
Actually, that needs to be clarified. At NEDLAC, what is happening is that the discussion has been elevated to the high level of political principles. It's no longer a task team issue, but it's an issue that is dealt with at the level of political leadership. Not that COSATU is blocking the issue, but it has been elevated at a strategic level as the most urgent issue to be addressed.
Very quickly, we're going to ask for closing comments. Iraj.
I think my comment is that unless we deal and sort the issue as a package, supply and demand side, this is a palliative. It's like a painkiller for somebody who's got cancer in the body. What are we doing? We're just creating a red herring, a political debate, and the issue continues at the expense of our young human resources. I'm deeply concerned that 20 years later, nearly 20 years later, 18 years later, we're still discussing the same systemic issues. And we got to own up to this. We got to have really a crisis, national crisis event, bring COSATU, DA, ANC, anybody else who matters, but don't come out of that conference without finding a real solution.
Tim, closing comments from you.
I think it's very interesting what Chris said about political principles at NEDLAC. I think that's a euphemism for the fact that NEDLAC is not discussing it because COSATU refuses to, so they're simply leaving it up to COSATU and the ANC and effectively blocking this policy. Now, what you saw on Tuesday last week was 4,000 young people from all race groups coming out on the streets of Joburg to say to COSATU, this will not stand. We want this youth wage subsidy. And they're looking, some of those young people, to what's happening in the Western Cape, where the Western Cape government has introduced a youth wage subsidy that's very small scale because of limited resources, but shows that we can create jobs for young people with the government stepping in to provide a small subsidy that gets people to break the back of that youth unemployment and gets them onto a productive, into a productive job and allows them more potential to find jobs later on in their career too.
Chris, your closing comment.
Our view is that unless you address the systemic issues, education, and create a school-to-work transition, change the structure of the economy, you are not going to solve this issue of youth unemployment. And by the way, youth unemployment is an international phenomenon, and in South Africa, youth are the majority of the people in the labor force. So what we need to do is to try to resolve these systemic issues that we've been talking about for the past 20 years.
Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen.